Hi guys, welcome back to The Discerning Gamer. More Dawn of War 3 news. Relic are spoiling us at Christmas time. We've had the reveal trailer for the Orks and also another episode of Fog of War going into the cinematics, some of the characters that we're going to see and how they're going to be telling the story in Dawn of War 3. So, of course, plenty of extra detail for me to pore over and hopefully give some interesting tidbits and speculation for you guys to keep us busy while we're waiting for beta and actually getting our hands on the game. So without further ado, I want to have a look at the Orks trailer first, and I'm just going to kind of try and react to this live to speed up producing these videos. First thing we're looking at here is the Ork base, which I love the aesthetic style they've taken here. It looks sufficiently ridiculous, rambling, childish, but also sinister. I think they've chosen a good tile set on the map for it as well. Looks kind of volcanic, churned up, inhospitable, just a kind of orky place to be seeing. And I love the detail of all of the spikes that we're seeing on the buildings, all of the orky faces that we've seen churned in there. So we also get a cross-section of units that we're looking at here. So bottom left, we can see Gorguts, who's returning from Winter Assault and the other games. He's had a complete overhaul, and one of the art guys, I think the game art director from Relic, actually did a piece on how they went about designing him for this game, which I'll link below. Some of the other things, we can see a weird boy who has got some sort of floating runes circling around him, some warp energy or something like that. It's interesting because it kind of looks similar to one of the abilities that we saw Jonah Orion, the Space Marine librarian, use in the Eldar reveal. So interesting that they're kind of keeping that continuity rather than making Space Marine Psychers powers look completely different to Ork ones. Bottom right, we can see some Gretchens carrying comically large spanners. I'm sure they're going to be really well animated and have some really sort of fun little animations going on, but obviously that's going to be the Ork builder unit and possibly their detection unit as well. And I suppose that makes sense because from a lore perspective, Gretchens, to survive for very long, they have to be constantly paranoid about getting crumped by a bigger orc or something like that. So it seems logical that they would be able to spot things beyond what a normal orc would be able to detect. So looking at some of the buildings here, I think you can see around here we've got a tower at the bottom here, and they're over here and over here and over here. I think those are what Relic has talked about as war towers or war banners, and I think they're going to act as a defensive structure. I think this is an orc boy with some sort of stubber gun on top here, and they not only act as kind of a map presence thing and a defense, but I think they also are going to act into part of the new orcish mechanic, which is gathering battlefield scrap. So I think when they destroy super units, when they destroy vehicles, they are going to have a scrap left on the battlefield, which plays right into the lore with them, and they can use to upgrade units or as some sort of resource to help them produce additional units. That hasn't really been elaborated on, but I think from a gameplay perspective, that's going to be awesome because it's going to reward orcs for fighting. It's going to reward them for not only fighting but winning, retaining control of the battlefield to give them that. And I think that's a really nice additional dynamic that sets the orc apart from the Space Marines and the Eldar, and it plays right into the lore because orcs love fighting, but orcs love fighting and winning. You can't, as a war boss of an orc war, you can't maintain it unless it has momentum. If you get beaten too many times, your leadership's going to get questioned, and there's likely to be internal rivalries and the war splitting apart. So that's a great, very subtle way of kind of showing that through the scrap mechanic, because if you fight lots and win, you're going to have scrap, and that's going to give you that extra resource to build momentum to improve your army in some way. But if you fight and lose, you're not going to have access to that scrap, and that's going to slow you down, which mimics the lore perfectly. So looking at a couple of these other buildings, first of all, they're massive, which is awesome. It looks like at the back here, I mean, this is entirely speculation. This thing here at the side, that looks like some sort of late tier foundry. That looks like it's going to be spitting out some sort of vehicles or something big. It looks more complicated. It's got more stacks and lights and chimneys coming off of it, so maybe that's a super unit related building. This kind of has a curvature that looks like a hangar or something, or maybe like a vehicle depot, something that we would use for producing vehicles. Also, I suppose the truck is right out the front of that as well, or maybe it's related to the death copters. We'll see more of those later. Here, might guess that's some sort of, you know, the boys' hut, like a barracks or something like that. It looks, you know, it's got less of an imposing face on it. It's got an open pit with smoke coming out of it, or an open hole in the front, and the boys are surrounding that, so maybe that's a barracks unit of some sort. But anyway, let's keep going on. I'm really enjoying the music with this as well. I watched a little featurette with the guy doing the sound design. Now we've moved up here, we can see kind of an orky looted tank or artillery piece. That sort of looks like a basilisk, an Imperial Guard basilisk gun that's been modified in some way. And you can see here, this is looks like it is to do with some sort of vehicle production. It's got the magnetic grabber crane, and there's clearly some sort of industry going on in the bottom with all the smoke and light pouring out of it. So here we see, I love this touch here, we see a Death Dread going into combat against some Howling Banshees supported by 2 trucks, and you'll notice here that the trucks have a new mechanic to them, that the back compartment which holds Du Bois, it sort of tilts back like a modern multiple launch rocket system and actually fires the boys onto the enemy, and that just is fantastically orky, and is obviously going to help them get their melee units into combat, and not only lends another kind of aspect of utility to the trucks, not just sort of the mobility, speed and protection from small arms that they afford, but also that you can get the boys literally right in there. So we see the boys going to land on these Banshees, and you can see there's actually a stun effect on all the places where they've landed, so that's awesome. Hopefully that's going to be kind of like a skill shot system and a really nice element of micro, that you know, when you see these trucks pulling up, you're going to have to be careful that you're not going to have a load of Orc boys just plastered on top of your men. You're going to have to make sure that you spread out sufficiently and that you're microing your units to avoid incoming Orc projectiles. So yeah, looking at the melee animations there, I must say they're very shiny. I'm not sure how I feel about this. There's a lot of kind of, with each swing of the choppers, you're getting a whole neon trail behind it, and although it looks kind of cool and bombastic, and it's obviously super violent, it looks like a right ruck and maul that you'd expect with Orcs. I'm not sure how I feel about them having like a neon trail behind them. Like, I get it if it's a mech boy or someone with some sort of power weapon, but these are just regular boys, aren't they? Here we see another ability sort of emanating a effect here. I'm guessing that might be Wa. That was an ability previously that you could use to buff up your Orc boys and have them get a temporary increase in combat strength. So I think that's probably what that is. You can see it was interesting, actually. I just noticed there that the effect wasn't actually emanating on the Orc boys as if it was affecting them. It was actually emanating from the Eldar units. Let's just have another look at that. Yeah, you can see here the Dire Avengers are actually the ones pulsing out that red thing. Maybe Perhaps that's a morale break or something like that. I don't know. That's kind of interesting though. And I'll just go back here a second. You can see these little bits of this is where the Viper jet bike exploded. You can see, I'm guessing these shiny bits on the ground are scrap. So it'd be interesting to know what that actually is going to do for the Orc economy, but also how they're going to gather that. Do you have to get a Gretchen out? Does it have to be carried back to base? Can boys pick it up? It'd be kind of an interesting thing if you had to bring out your workers to gather it and then take it back to some sort of depot back at base, because that way, you know, if you're playing against the Orcs and you've just lost a fight, you think, oh crap, they've got a load of scrap from a downed predator or grav tank or something, but you can somehow intercept it before it gets back to base. That would be a really cool way for you to kind of recover and add another element of skill and micro and map awareness to it as well. So here we've got, this is really cool. These are tank hunter boys with rocket launchers, and it also looks like they can deploy bomb squigs as well, which looks fantastic. Kind of interesting that they're like bathed in this red aura. I don't know if that's just an ambient thing from their character models. Like, are their guns giving that off? Is their armor giving that off? Or is that some sort of effect that they're under? Interesting to know, but I love that these bomb squigs, again, it looks like a real targeted ability. So I can imagine, you know, in between managing your trucks, managing your hero, managing targeted abilities like these squigs from the tank hunters, you're going to have a lot to do as an Orc player, and that, you know, high APM and attention to what your units are doing is going to be really important. Interesting to note there was actually a little bit of a delay, if you notice, from the squigs. Just before they exploded, they kind of jumped up and had a little animation to warn them. So it's nice that the enemy gets some chance to react to that, particularly the Eldar. You know, if you had Fleet of Foot, it's likely you could probably have got those Die Avengers away or minimize the damage they took. So yeah. These are Orc Deathcopters, and they look awesome. Love that, you know, they're sort of firing out with big shooters as they go around, but also that they've got these sort of rotor blades on the front that are screeching across the ground as they go. That looks fantastic, and also looks like, I don't know if it's an aimed ability or if it's you set them to melee mode, but obviously if you aim that to pass through a squad at the right angle, you could maximize the damage there. So it's even more micro that we're seeing. What's this one on the right here? You can see it sort of spins up, it rears up, you see the blade start to glow, and then it hits the ground and goes through. So I think that's actually like an aimed ability that'll have a cooldown. Again, looks awesome. But cool also that it's telegraphed and it gives the other player a chance to respond and micro around that. So that's very promising. It looks like these killer cans, maybe they're of a certain configuration, but one of their arms is like a rocket launcher that fires multiple bursts at the same time. So maybe they kind of take the role as a more hardy tank hunter. We see them engaging a couple of Falcons right now. Also, I think that the tile set here is looking sufficiently more varied and grimdark than the initial footage that we saw out of the release, where they were doing it on an ice planet, or maybe at the pole of a planet where it was all snow and rock, and it made the units pop out a lot more and probably look a bit more colourful and cartoony than perhaps they are. So I love that we got a bit more kind of volcanic ash and scrubby vegetation, and obviously in the background some ruins that look like they've been used by Orcs for something. Oh, here's an interesting touch. Look at the back here, we have a capture point that it looks to have a power and 2 requisition points on it. So it's interesting that we'll have a mixed capture points that give us both requisition and power, and maybe those are going to be you know, ones that are put in particularly tight spots of contention. So that's another interesting tidbit to get. Again, I'm loving the sort of periodic damage that comes out of the Wraith Knight here. You can see it's starting to rupture at various parts around the armor, and you're getting this billowing green, ethereal kind of Eldar alien-looking fire. Big fan of that, and great kind of death animation on it. Interestingly, even though it exploded there, it actually left a wreckage. Which is great. Glad to see that. So here we see like a big mixed orc force. We've got a stomper at the background. That looks fantastic. It seems to be a ranged one. It looks awesome. It's got all the lights coming off it, and it's firing energy weapons as well as small arms and rockets, and just looks fantastic. It's a real carnage. Interesting bit of kind of tactics there, in that we had the dismounted boys go in initially to engage the first line of the Eldar, whereas the trucks didn't kept hold of their units and drove up, lending kind of ranged fire support. And then after that, they then saw the second line of Eldar. I know this is obviously like a scripted fight, but it's kind of interesting that I could actually see this happening in the actual game itself. The trucks waited, and then the second line of Eldar then fired their boys onto that, and that's actually quite good tactics if you think about it, because with the Eldar you kind of want to have one unit that is baiting and taking the initial hit, but then we want to have units at the back who aren't going to be tied up in melee or taking damage, that can actually rain fire down on the orcs while perhaps the front units micro and keep them busy. So for the orc to then keep the trucks loaded with boys ready to actually then fire back onto them at the background is pretty awesome. I think that we can see that working in the game. Also, I'm guessing the Stomper is an orc super unit. Looks awesome. Really great animation. I love the way it's kind of, you can see it as it walks, bits of it are just shaking the top canopy. The top canopy here over the kind of headpiece is shaking and rolling about. It just looks, fantastically janky, but also really menacing. And also, again, here we see this red effect coming up around here. Now, I don't know if that is to symbolize a morale break, if the morale system is making a comeback in this, or if it's something to do with Orc War. Maybe it's marking them as enemies that are now going to take more damage. I don't know where that's coming from. It doesn't seem like there's a hero unit or a caster like a Psyker to be actually doing this, so that's kind of interesting. Oh, actually, tell a lie. I think this is Gorguts in the middle here, so maybe it's him that is generating that red effect. And yeah, we can see here more scrap generated by the downed vehicles. There's some up here, some behind the Stomper. Also really interesting is the just at the end of that fight there, the boys were sort of glowing with some sort of power, and maybe the sort of swiping neon effect was to symbolize that they were under the influence of some sort of buff. I hope it's not. I hope that kind of swiping glowing effect is not there on regular melee units right from the early game or whatever, because it's just a bit OTT, isn't it, really? So on to the next Fog of War episode. Great to actually, I like that the developers are engaging with the community in this way, and taking the time to discuss how they're developing the game, what their thought process is behind it. I mean, I personally nerd out over this kind of stuff, just from a game design perspective, but also because it's about Dawn of War and I love this series. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they have to say. Interesting that they chose to highlight chaos here. I mean, it's inevitable that we will see chaos in the Dawn of War 3. Does it mean they're going to be in the base game? Are they going to put it in as an expansion? I don't know, but it's interesting that the first thing they went to here is some Chaos cinematics from Dawn of War 2, I believe. So maybe that's a little tease. This is interesting to me because it looks like for at least some element of the storytelling, I'm sure there's going to be, you know, in-engine cinematics, and maybe there'll be more cinematics in the vein of the reveal cinematic. But these almost look like still piece dioramas where they've done, you know, really highly detailed renders, and they're kind of moving the camera through it. And that's just a really nice look. I'm a big fan of that. You know, Dishonored 2 I've been playing recently. That's got, before each of the missions, some really nice, you know, sort of hand-drawn animations to go in. And I think that it's great to do that kind of thing because, you know, it breaks it up. It shows that it's specifically related to the story, but also it lets you put in a bit more kind of feel by having it in more of a loose art style. This looks fantastic. See, again, you've got it's a still shot, or it's moving in slow-mo, but you can see the camera panning through it, which is quite, kind of looks like a diorama. And I don't know if that's, you know, they took inspiration from that from the tabletop, because, you know, essentially when you're in the middle of a battle in your turn and you moved all your units, and, you know, it is almost like you're creating a diorama as well. So maybe it's a nod to that. And I know that the guys at Relic spend a lot of time with the tabletop game, and you know, take it seriously, pay homage to that. So it's cool. Good, cool idea. Look at that render. That is gorgeous. You know, taking some liberties with the artwork, I think, in terms of like the kind of edge of the Space Marine's helmet and the wrinkles here and stuff. I don't know if this is, you know, meant to be battle damage, but also this kind of the way that this Imperial skull is coming out the side of his bolter. It almost looks a bit too organic, so I don't think it's meant to be like canon, this is how Space Marines look, but it's almost like a kind of interpretation of it. But the detail on it is fantastic, and I like you know, that they're letting the artists have some license to it, because it's obvious they know the lore, they're respecting the lore, so kind of let them have a bit of fun with it. And obviously there's some heat shimmer down here in the corner as well. Anatomically, these don't look like typical orcs. It's obviously kind of a interpretation of them, and I'm fine with that, because they do, you know, they're broad strokes, exactly the same as orcs you'd expect to see. But one of the interesting things here is these look a little bit like some of the monsters in that David Bowie film. What is it? I think it's The Labyrinth, where he's in like this skin-tight leotard and juggling a crystal ball and stuff, and he's got this kind of army of gremlins, and he's stolen this little girl's sister, and is going to turn her into like a goblin or something. And they actually, this orc in particular looks a bit like one of those. I'm not taking away from it, he looks fantastic, but it's just channeling that specifically for me. And I love the idea of David Bowie with his, you know, bulge out in a leotard commanding the orcs, being like, you know, oh, go over there and crump those people, bloody hell. Gorguts looks awesome there. I love this ridiculous OTT power claw that they've put onto him. I think that what he said just then about there being like this brutal, devious, sort of brutal, you know, just carnage. The orcs are just everywhere, crumping, smashing everything. It looks like a mess. But there's behind it these devious machinations going on. I think this image particularly of Gorguts just says that totally, because you've got this, you know, almost comical size power claw here that looks like it's practically good for nothing other than like tearing a tank in half or smashing something to pieces. But look at his other hand, the way he's kind of got this gesture of, it's almost like Shakespearean, like, these are my grand machinations or my plan that I'm having there. It's like he is the duality of the orcs, like encompassed in one place in that shot. I really like that. Yeah, I mean, well, you know, people may complain that the the actual in-engine game is not grim dark enough, but I mean, obviously they're crowbarred in some grim darkness in there somewhere. that guy is not having a good day.
Audio barks for all the characters, and you know, hearing
This looks awesome. Oh my god, I'm so excited for this game. Just to, you know, I think one thing that, you know, the old Command and Conquer games did really well is that those live action cinematics and the story pieces in between the missions were really fun to watch and so gratifying that, like, once you'd completed a mission, obviously the mission was fun to play, but you'd be like, oh yes, now I get to see more of the story, more of these kind of crazy characters. I think I'm going to get exactly that same feeling with Dawn of War 3 from these dioramas, because look at them. They look fantastic. You know, obviously the Space Marines are a little bit more gangly than we would see on the tabletop, but I think when you see them in motion, that makes sense, because I always think when you see a smaller, when you see like a tabletop cannon Space Marine, his legs almost look like he would kind of waddle, or he wouldn't move quite correctly, so I can see why they've done that. But this just looks awesome. I want to see these in between the missions, so I'm hoping that we're going to get these in between each of the missions, and it's kind of like a little, you know, pat on the head, well done, here's some more ridiculously luscious art for you to tuck into.
The Space Marines call out to the Emperor.
I want this as a desktop background. This is interesting. This looks almost like a kind of something that would be quite relevant to the story. So this is obviously Maka. We can see her by her spear and her sort of characteristic wraithbone struts that come out of her back. And this looks like some sort of moment of revelation for her, that she's, you know, just come across this construct that looks, you know, alien to any of the factions there. It's obviously not Eldar. It's too blocky and inorganic. You know, it's not made of wraithbone. It's clearly not Orky, and it's clearly not Imperium technology. So, you know, is this something from before the Dark Age of technology, or what is it? I feel like this will be some sort of fulcrum of the story here. That meteor looks a lot like the thing that we just saw Maka kind of standing over in awe of. So maybe that's part of a space hulk or something that the warp has vomited out onto this planet that the you know, three factions are now going to be competing over. That is clearly an Eldar autarch. So that's, I'm going to take that as kind of like soft confirmation that we're going to see them as an Eldar elite. And also, interestingly, it looks like he's a male one, whereas in Dawn of War 2 we had a female one. So it'd be interesting to see, maybe that is the captain that Maka is reporting into in Dawn of War 3. So he could be another interesting Eldar personality there, and he's clearly going head to head. That might well be Gorguts. It looks like him. We've got the mechanical legs, we've got that big tank on his back that's powering his hydraulic arm, but obviously it looks like it's probably raised above him in an effort to soundly crump this guy. So interesting, but yeah, that's another Eldar character for us to look out for, and he looks awesome.
Walking things off.